You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 285 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I am your host, Ben Eagle. We are in Scotland today, and my guest is Matthew Anderson, who until recently was farming with his father and brother over 3 farms in the Scottish borders, over 660 hectares, all grassland and hill land, half owned and half rented. But he's now started a new farming business with his brother on about half that amount of land, and that's mostly rented ground. And to see what this looks like, you can actually check out his YouTube channel at Borders Farm Life. Today we're going to talk about his farming journey so far. We'll talk about improving hill farmland, actually, and specifically selecting cattle for low maintenance outwintering. So even though we're coming into the spring, there's always next year. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. Welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Hello, yeah, it's great to be with you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing this. Can you start by just painting a picture, I suppose, of the Scottish borders? It's a part of the world that I know a little bit, and I mean, I love the borders, but how would you describe it to someone who hasn't been before?
Well, it's the bonny rolling hills of the borders. That's how the song goes. And it is really that rolling hills with a lot of rivers, and the Tweed is the big river, and all of the tributaries run into the Tweed, River Tweed, really. It's got some really good productive land on the east towards Kelso and Coldstream, which is very arable and very good land. And then all of the valleys go up, away from the coast on the east, up into the different valleys, which all feed into the River Tweed. So it's a very mixed area, I suppose, and it's traditionally has been mixed farming, and
Yep.
the stock come out of the hills and go down into the lowlands sort of as they sort of get fattened. So I'm trying to think what it could be similar to, but elsewhere in England, maybe like the Cotswolds a bit, I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly, but it's a really lovely area, and over every hill you get another view. So it's lovely because you're always seeing different changing landscape and different types of farming. Like I say, quite close to each other. Within like 5 miles, you can go from very low arable into some quite upland, sort of up to heather, quite quickly. So you can get some nice dramatic changes.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one thing that struck me. If I take myself back to the first time that I went to the borders, I wasn't quite expecting it to be quite so diverse, both in terms of sort of farming, speaking of farming, but also within the landscape itself. It's a really lovely landscape. What was life like growing up um, in the hills?
So growing up, yeah, I moved up to the Scottish borders when I was about 5. So I
Okay.
was actually born in England and then had a couple of years in Tanzania, which is a with my
Wow.
parents. Yeah, which was I don't remember it, but I was fed lots of avocados to keep me healthy.
What were they doing out there?
So they were doing charity work, and my dad was project managing like a youth camp for Scripture Union Scotland. So it was a youth camp that my dad was trying to project manage to get built, and then
Oh,
they're
wow.
using it for a youth camp out in Tanzania. So I lived there for about 2 years, and then came back. My parents were both teaching for a little bit, and then came back to the farm once my grandfather was probably ready to retire or was struggling to manage the farm all by himself because it was a
Okay.
big unit back then. So growing up, I lived on the farm until I was 12, and then we moved into the town to be a bit closer to school. It was nearly on the Carter Bar is where the farm is, which where I grew up. So it's about 10 miles away from the nearest town, Jedburgh. So it was quite isolated at times, but I loved being out in the woods and on the trampoline and just growing up in
Yeah.
the wild.
How's the farm changed sort of over time? You mentioned it was quite
Yeah.
large when your granddad had it.
Yeah, so he bought about 3,000 acres in 1980.
Wow.
Um, so that was him selling some shops he had, and then selling some land in Yorkshire. So they lived in Yorkshire for a while, um, but then took the plunge to come to Scotland and yeah, buy a big area of very unimproved hill ground, with almost no fences and no forestry,
Wow.
and um, lots of white hill, which is like very tough, long grass, and very unimproved. And then so set about trying to improve that and using livestock to improve it and using lime to increase the pH. That was his one of his passions. Well, that was his main passion. My granddad was a soil scientist, and he did
Right.
a PhD in soil science, and so that's how he then made the move up to Scotland.
Really interesting. So was he sort of more sort of soil led then
He
in
was,
the
yeah.
way that he managed the farm?
Yeah, probably. He was always digging holes, and sadly, I didn't get to know him that well as he passed when I was about 16.
Okay.
And now there's this big move towards soil as like a great carbon store, as a great thing that we need to look after because it is driving everything in our farm. But it's just sad that he didn't get to see this day because he was a pioneer,
Yeah.
before. And so then, yeah, since then, the farm's been fenced hugely, and planted a lot of trees as shelter belts for livestock, and just increasing the stocking numbers to help eat down the grass and promote more biodiversity in within the grass. Ultimately, then it was split between my father and his two brothers. They all still farm. So my uncles both farm, and we work closely with my uncles and my father.
Did you grow up sort of wanting to go into farming? Did you consider anything else?
No, I always like loved being outside, and then I actually got into fishing. So this was when I was probably 12, 13, 14. I was really into fishing, mostly fly fishing for rainbow trout and brown trout, which is again really good in the Scottish borders. So then because of that, I then started looking at, okay, how can business and fishing work together? And I actually discovered aquaculture,
Yeah.
which is fish farming.
Yeah,
And it was
it's
at a
something
stage,
something we don't cover enough on the
yeah,
podcast, and I always, whenever anyone mentions that, I think,
yeah.
oh, yeah, we really must talk about it more.
Well, we'll have to come back for a full
Yeah, of
podcast.
course.
Yeah, I know a lot about fish farming too because I studied it at Stirling University, and then I did go into fish farming for 5 years, up on the west coast near Oban, west coast of Scotland. So, and I loved that, and I was fascinating just to learn another aspect of, farming, and the detail that you need for fish farming is probably more like the dairy system where you need to have attention to detail because disease outbreaks are quite common
Yeah, of
and
course.
things like that. So you have to really be on top of things. And I did a lot of like veterinary and microscope work as well. I learned lots of manager training and I was upskilled a lot by working for a big company, and that was really beneficial for me as well. And I think my mum wanted me to get away from the farm and try and do something else before, to decide what I wanted to do with my life and not have to come back to farming. I think probably my dad always hoped I might come back to farm.
When did you make that decision to head back?
So 2018, really, and then 2019 was actually when I moved back from Oban. We had our first child, me and my wife, up in Oban, and then so to be closer to family as well was a real drive. And we didn't have a huge idea of what we'd do, but once we decided that we were going to come back, then my dad went looking for some more opportunities, more land, so that we could sort of expand our numbers and have enough for an extra income, like an extra wage for myself. And it worked well with my uncle. So we ended up basically taking on all of my uncle's stock and his land and renting the land off my uncle. So it worked well for both us and for my uncle.
And bring us right up to date because I mean you've recently started a new business with your brother. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in, I mean, what inspired this move and yeah, what does the business look like?
It was basically because of us all working together. So this was I came back in 2019 and my brother came back in 2020, which was also or around it was around 2019 as well. But it was in some ways a little bit unexpected that he came back as well. Then we've been working together for 4 years or so, and both myself and my brother had have obviously lots of ideas and lots of sort of excitement, enthusiasm, and drive to do things maybe slightly differently to the way my dad did them.
Yeah.
So I had my own cattle herd. I had my cattle herd since 2014, and my brother started a sheep flock around a similar time. So my dad has always been amazing at like promoting us doing our own business and our own like
Okay.
learning through doing it ourselves, and he's been amazing for that. Yeah, he's quite a high risk taker, so he's always he is keen to do new things, and but he's done a lot in his own life, his
Okay.
own farming journey. Yeah, I suppose he's maybe passing the baton on to us a little bit, and we can take more risks. And if we want to take risks, like changing the breeds of sheep and cattle, which is one thing that we have both expressed, the desire to do, then he wanted us to take that on our own back as our own responsibility. And so ultimately, me and my brother and my wife and his wife have all partnered up in a partnership, and then we have taken a loan from him. So we've bought his livestock and taken a
Okay.
loan from him, and we'll pay him back. So again, that's a very fortunate position to be in that he had such a strong business that was generating good profit, so he can actually loan us the money to buy the stock off him. So again, it's all down to his very good business sort of acumen over the last 30 years,
I was
which
going to
has
say
left us in a strong position.
it sounds
Yeah.
like yeah, this is a succession plan which has actually been going well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We're further down the line now where, like I say, we basically now are sort of farming half the area that we used to all farm it together. We're farming half the area and with about half the livestock. And we're still all working closely as a team. We're sharing machinery and we're sharing labor like at lambing time and for silage and harvest time. So it works very well. Well, it's yet to be seen because we are only 4 months in. Sort of, we started it just in November at when the
Okay.
tups went out. That was our count the ewes and put the tups out, and then that was our sort of clean slate at that point.
What breeds are you keeping?
So we've currently got Scotch mules, which is what we've always traditionally had, which is an amazing sheep, and they're very hard to beat. So my brother was particularly interested in trying easy cares, which are shedding sheep, just for the ease of not having to shear them and also being able to breed more of your own ewe lambs to keep yourself so that you're not having to necessarily buy in any ewe lambs which could come with a disease or whatever. And you can make your own sort of selection decisions on that. So that's the sheep side, and we're going to trial them. We have about 250 easy cares at the minute, and then we're trialing them sort of in amongst with the mules. So we'll see at lambing time how do they do? Are they lower maintenance generally? And try and work out roughly, how much each is leaving. The mules are all to a Suffolk tup this
Okay.
year, and or Suffolk tups, and the easy cares are pure generally. And then on the cattle side, we've historically had hill cattle, so mostly blue grey cattle, which is actually amazing breed, but they're a breed that's went quite unfashionable. But again, in the 80s and 90s, everyone had them. They were really popular cattle for, which is the blue grey, if anyone doesn't know, is a Galloway female, which is a very, very hard breed, which can withstand a lot of outwintering. It's got a long coat. It's got good feet for being out in the wet. Doesn't mind a lot of rain on its back.
That's
And
useful.
yeah, crossed with a white-bred shorthorn bull, which brings like a bit more size and frame and milkiness. And then the cross out of that is the blue grey, which is just an incredibly good cow, sort of all-rounder.
Okay.
And they can just survive on um, incredibly little. Like they're just very easy keeping. Flesh, their fleshing ability is excellent, so that you can get the high pregnancy rates. and even off like sort of poorer quality hills and forage. And then with that, we would usually cross it back to a Limousin bull or a Charolais bull, to try and put more growth and size into the calves and make them more attractive for a buyer for the calves to then have cattle that can finish earlier or bigger. But then comes with that is sometimes some harder calvings. So because you put a big bull onto a cow, sometimes the calving can be more difficult. And also, if you want to keep your own heifers, then you've only got a terminal cross to keep. So
Mm,
a Charolais or a Limousin cross heifer. And historically, I've just found that they don't last as long and they're not as hardy as like a blue gray. They're
okay.
just not maternal enough. And they can also they've got a temperament where they're just not very quiet and lots of people know what limousines are like. They can be show jumpers and they're constantly wrecking the fences. So they do calm down when they're actually a cow, but they're even still, I would like to try something different. And so I've actually got two stabilizer bulls now. So,
Okay, right.
which is really interesting. I've done a huge amount of research into breeds and Angus's versus stabilizers and versus Simmental and or Hereford. Lots of sort of more native breeds. And I've gone for the stabilizer and
Yeah.
we'll see what they're like.
Yeah, well,
And
seriously, people who like their stabilizers really like their stabilizers in my
yeah,
experience.
yeah, I think obviously there's huge variety within any breed. So you just got to sort of target what you're looking for. And also then we will see because the context of everyone's farm is different. So they might not work for us, but they might work really well. And I think I know what they will work for is they will breed a good heifer to keep as a cow. So that's what my main aim is to be able to produce my own heifers, which is going to bring a whole load of benefits because you've got the epigenetics coming from the cow, even when the calf is in the uterus, and everything that they're going to get from their mother being a blue gray, or at least being a cow that's been successful on our system for 7 or 8 years, then those are the heifers that I'll be able to use.
Part of what you've been talking about is about reacting to your environment and suitability for the hill, which is something I'm particularly interested in, both in terms of how you've been taking and matching those stock decisions, but also as in the breed decisions, but also the suitability and the way you manage the stock on the hill. So yeah, just interested in that interaction in terms of, I suppose your general management of the hill.
So if we go back a little bit to what the farm was like, with no fences and with incredibly poor diversity of grass, basically just lots of old rough grass. Really, the cattle is what has changed that. So um, having the cattle, I suppose you'd call it like amp grazing or mob grazing now.
Okay.
So in a way, I think that's the strategy for the improvement of the hill, because at the stage we're at now is that there's very little hill left, and it's all improved land that's probably like most of it's been ploughed and has been improved to the point that it can be reseeded, which is miles away from where it was 20 years ago. And permanent fencing was really what was used to do that in those days. And now we have electric fencing, and I'd like to continue to push forward with, trials where we make the field sizes even smaller and have like even more sort of mob grazing. And that's what one of my areas of research at the minute is how to do that, and also just to maybe try it this year, and then I'll learn from trying and seeing what does work on our system and what, doesn't work so well.
And you're organic?
Yeah, that's right. So that is a vital part, I suppose, of our farm. And I really definitely dislike using any product, whether it's nitrogen or whether it's sprays. And I just know, having done a bit of research and having seen other people's farms, just like at how little sort of wildlife there can be, whereas ours is always teeming with life. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an organic sort of snob, but I do really think it's a great way to farm, and we can still make a reasonable profit doing it. And that's mainly through, cutting costs and having a resilient flock and a resilient cow herd that can manage without any inputs really, like extremely minimal on the inputs, especially the cattle. Like we don't give any vitamins or minerals, so they all just manage off the pastures and the soil, what's actually unlocked under the ground. Like so, the vet med bills are very low. Like the actual calving ease is easy, so there's little as possible labor involved in all of those things, and so the cow is just left to get on with it.
When did the farm convert?
I think it was probably early 2000s actually, 2002 or so was when it converted. I remember just before being organic, when I was a young boy, bagging up cake, which feed out of the feed shed, just bags and bags and bags. And so it was a change at that point to cut back massively on the feed. And so that's another thing is we buy a little bit of cake for the sheep at this time of year, just in the last th 3 or 4 weeks before lambing. But then very little compared to what we used to buy. And of course, organic cake's more expensive as well. But you can get it. But to minimize these and just use just silage and hay, which is conserved from the summer, and then any grass that we've got, is a really natural system.
I want to go back to the cattle. We're talking about traits, really, I suppose, generally, in terms of what you're prioritizing. And you have already inferred this a little bit when you were talking about breeds, but especially when I suppose when you're thinking of selecting traits for low maintenance outwintering, for example, how have you gone about making your decisions?
Well, I think starting off with if you're going to start with a blue grey cow, then she's already 90% of the way there because of how native bred she is, and whereas if you were starting with something less native, then you would probably have a higher percentage that would struggle and would drop out. But ultimately, what you're looking for is a cow with a big rumen, so it's got a good capacity of rumen for her body size. Um, our cows are on the smaller end, like sort of 500 to 650 kilos, and there'll be even some cows in there that are probably just 450 kilos. So they're definitely on, than that for Britain is very small. In America, there's more common with having herds like that. But a smaller cow can eat more of a percentage of its body weight, which means that it can maintain condition more easily. And you get the benefit of the fertility when they gain condition in summer. But over the winter, they need a big room, and because we feed silage, and they have to be able to convert that silage effectively. They have to be able to just maintain that flesh. So we have cows still that are not doing that as well, and so we're still taking the bottom 5 or 10%. We're trying to move them towards the cull list. Yeah, that works well, I think.
What are the opportunities for your business?
The opportunities are, I think, not necessarily always in farming, because me and my brother both would like to get the business to a stage where it can run with minimal labor and minimal intervention to then actually free us up to do other things. And so that might be going to do another job somewhere else, or whether it's myself doing more and more YouTube content creation, whether that becomes like an income stream at some point, it might do, but or whether that is just choosing to spend more time with my family, or having enough. We do have enough, and it's working that out for every person. And if I want to chase more, then I can go and find another field to rent, or I can go and knock on people's doors and look for more grass, and then have more sheep. So I could make it a full-time job. So it's hard to know. We're at that transition point where we're going into our own business. We're going to have, very tight cash flow at times, and we'll only know by November this year whether we actually did make any money this year. It's a bit up in the air, but I think there's having a sort of a really low maintenance flock and herd is one of the number one things. because it's what is it? Yeah, the when I was listening to a few podcasts, but the Pasture Pod by Michael Blanch, he talked quite a bit about the time, and he had this series on time,
Yep.
which was really fascinating, and that is a really good one to listen to just to hear different farmers what they do or what they don't do, like and different ways of looking at farming. And the Pareto principle where you work 20% of your work is 80% of your profit, and 80% of your work is only 20% of your profit. So if you can cut back to the point you're just doing 20% and you're getting 80%, then you've got loads of extra to do other things with. And for me, I think it's freeing up my mind for learning, for discovering what is the next business step. What is
Mm.
the next thing to not miss out on.
You're not tempted by
Yeah.
fish farming?
I would be, but the thing is, it's so high input. Basically, it's like the
Yeah.
opposite of what I like to
Yeah.
do. It's like extremely high input, extremely high risk because you can lose your whole crop with one disease. It can be extremely high output and high, profit, but it's just too risky, and it's dominated by like big companies as well with sort of the resilience to be able to take a big hit. Not really tempted by it, no. But I'm certainly looking into innovation and agri-tech and artificial intelligence and how that's going to change farming potentially.
How do you see, and this is a big question here, but how do you see the future of hill farming in Scotland? And I'm
Mm.
particularly interested to hear in your viewpoint, obviously, yeah, over the border, maybe catching up listeners in England as a Scottish farmer. What is sentiment like in your area, sort of towards Scottish government policy, future directions, but also just general sentiment in the hills?
There's certainly been a big issue with tree planting in the last 5 or 6 years, which has reduced numbers of livestock on the hills by a lot. But now the government's reined back on their tree planting targets and cut back on how much money's going into tree planting. So that's helped in some ways. And the hills and some of the lowland, has been planted, which is probably all this lack of production of meat is what's then driving the higher prices now. But that's one aspect of it. The Scottish government, I think, they've been so slow to do anything. It's actually been a good thing in some ways for farmers in that we've continued to get our subsidy, and they've not done what they did in England and taken it all away. They're going to give 70%, I think, is what the going forward is going to be 70% you'll get on an area-based payment, but then there'll be additionality involved, so you have to then start jumping through hoops to get any more than that. But a lot of these hoops are things that are really, helpful and good things to do. And as being organic as well, we get an extra payment, which is a greening payment on top. So that's another benefit of being organic is that we are getting more subsidy. There's also this Scottish suckler beef support scheme, which again is like a really amazing blessing that we get. We get that. It's around about £100 a calf for a beef calf. So, that's really
Well,
helps to add to the profitability of a suckler cow. And I suppose that is so that when you look at the pure business of it, like our cattle herd, if they are just 600 kilos, or if you had another herd that was 900 kilos, I could keep 3 cows for two of their cows. And then I'm getting an extra BPS on this suckler beef support scheme. So there's
okay.
another £100 there, over and above because I've just got more cows on the ground. So smaller cows have been working well for us for that reason as well as the easy fleshing nature of them.
Let's talk about your YouTube channel. It's called Borders Farm Life. What motivated you to start? I suppose just sharing your farming journey with an audience through YouTube.
I suppose I am inspired a little bit by Cammy Wilson, the sheep game. I've spoken to him quite a number of times at different events and at farm shows and things. And he's always sort of just encouraging other people just to just do it, just like get on and get some content out there. And I think that's partly it, and I definitely enjoy like sort of teaching people and showing what we're doing and helping other people to learn, what's going on and how food is produced and where it comes from and the realities of, farming, being outside and life and death in farming. So I think it's just partly that, and I've always enjoyed doing bits of editing with videos and things like that. And so I'm just putting some content out there and see what happens. And it might become a little bit of an income stream at one day, or it may not. But it's just a bit of fun. And if I enjoy doing it, I'm going to keep doing it. And if I don't enjoy
It's
it, then I won't be too bothered about stopping.
it's the best way to look at anything in life, I think.
Yeah,
Exactly. I like the name. I like the name. I think it's good.
great. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the response you've had from viewers, I mean, do you know sort of who is your sort of audience? Do you think is it
Yeah,
farmers watching it? Is it general public? Is it local people? Who is it?
it is a mixture. There's definitely some local people who have um picked it up through Instagram a little bit. That has sometimes post on Instagram too. But I looked at my analytics on YouTube and it was like mostly over 50s, and I was like,
Oh,
wow.
really?
But then again, the average age of a farmer is over 50. So
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
maybe it's those over 50s farmers. I don't know. But I think it's I think there's just a massive move towards like watching YouTube as basically your TV, your entertainment, and like again, having looked at the business plans for different things and where things are going, I think video and YouTube is like just still got massive potential for growth. So I'm just putting it out there, and yeah, like I say, we'll see what happens. I'm still very small, so I'm still in this sub 1,000 subscribers. So, I'm just starting out. But yeah, like I say, it's good fun and we'll see where it goes. And I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing some like lambing vlogs and the calving as well. Because again, we can talk a bit more about why we're doing this with different breeds of sheep or different breeds of cows and just seeing how they get on. And as well as being outside. We're calving and lambing all outside, apart from, a few problems inside. And that's another way that we bring down the sort of labor costs and the intensity of doing like a night lambing and all these things that loads of people do. Um,
Oh, yes.
it's just not for us. We just
And
let
when
them
do
get on with
you,
it.
yeah, when do you start?
So we actually are starting lambing on the 24th of March
Yeah.
and then calving around a similar time as well.
Matthew, we are going to start to round this up. It's been great to have you on the show. I'm going to ask you the last two questions that I ask everyone when they come on the show. The first is, what would your message for the public be if you had any message for the public?
Yeah, it would be try and understand where your food comes from and think about that a bit more and how food can be really good for you, but it can also be really bad for you. I've done a lot of looking into ultra processed foods and how terrible they are for your health. And I think having whole foods like sheep and beef and oats and like just going back to basics on those good old foods is something to really consider. Also eating local veg and in season veg. I just think it's so critical for our health. That's yeah, I suppose that would be a message to the public and even just to learn. There's so much information out there now about different processed foods and what they're doing. That would be a message to the public, I suppose.
Super. And your message to your fellow farmers.
I would say look at your business and work out, where are you actually making money and where are you losing money? And ultimately that's what you need to focus on is being a sustainable, profitable business. And if you're not, then start thinking how to change that. Again, there's so much information out there, whether it's advisors or I use ChatGPT as a good advisor. And so you can get you can get business plans, you can just dig your way down into exactly where the money's going and where it's coming from. And like I would say, low input farming is the way forward, and it's the way that it's kind of been done for 50 years. And in some ways, we might need to go back to doing some of the old things, looking after the soil, not necessarily being organic, but thinking about looking after soil, having lower inputs, and maybe having a slightly lower output, but having a bigger profit in the middle. That's key, really.
We'll leave it there. But Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really interesting having an insight into your business, yeah, life in the borders, and yeah, I'm going to go off and just have a look at your YouTube channel again.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We will leave it there. That is it for today. A huge thank you to my guest, Matthew Anderson, for coming on the show. Thank you also for listening. Next time, we will be in London talking city farming and public engagement with Tom Davis. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening.